The following is a Hoop Ball presentation. Welcome to the Fantasy NBA Today podcast.
We're going to do it today, guys. We're going to have a show where I come on at the start and say it's going to be 30 to 40 minutes, and it's actually going to be 30 to 40 minutes. This one's going to be a little bit more brief for a couple of reasons. Number one, by all accounts, relatively quiet Monday. A couple of things to talk about, obviously. Number two, fairly interesting gambling Tuesday. But as we run up to the trade deadline, these individual games are going to be beyond cockeyed from a box score standpoint. Guys getting rested, guys getting partial minutes. The tanking teams has begun. And I've already told you, I really think you guys need to hang on to all but maybe one of your weekly moves if you're in a league where that's a thing as you run up to the trade deadline as well. You want to save those for Thursday and maybe even Friday. Save one for the day after when you see if any additional, not additional news breaks, but just as you start to figure out who's going to actually get into rotations, you might want even to save one for Saturday or Sunday when you see if any of these players that get moved, whoever it happens to be, somebody small, have a role for their new team. There was a trade yesterday that we didn't talk about on the podcast because I recorded in the wee hours of the morning that it hadn't happened yet. Rodney Hood was traded to the Portland Trailblazers for generally young fellas, largely irrelevant players that are just going to fall into the mix. Wade Baldwin, I believe, was the headliner of the two. I don't think this changes much in Cleveland. I don't think it changes much in Portland. If Rodney Hood couldn't carve out a role on that garbage Cavs team, I find it very hard to believe that he's going to play alongside Evan Turner and or Mo Harkless. He's effectively the backup shooting guard or small forward on this team. I don't see it. I mean, obviously he's going to a better situation, so maybe he'll get better looks playing alongside some more accomplished NBA players, but it's not a fantasy-relevant move. Obviously, the big news that came out on Monday was that the Lakers apparently offered the farm for Anthony Davis, and the Celtics are begging the Pelicans not to make the deal, but we don't know if they've promised to actually put Jason Tatum in the thing. On top of everything else, I mean, I know that I'm a Laker fan, so there's probably a little bit of this in there, but I think Jason Tatum is good. But I don't know that he's going to be a carry-the-team kind of superstar. I don't feel like he's changed much Season 1 to Season 2. And obviously some of that is because he's buried on a team with a boatload of guys around him. But the fact that everybody's talking about this like Jason Tatum is the only thing that can move the needle in this trade seems a little bit crazy. Anthony Davis's camp came out to say that he would not sign an extension with the Boston Celtics. So if they did trade him, it might be for a one-year rental. And then you're like, well, they could always move him during the season. I mean, if they trade everything to get Anthony Davis, the Celtics are going to use him to try to win a championship and then hope that would convince him to stick around. That's a big gamble when he's come out and said, I'm not going to play for you beyond one season. But we've seen how these things have shaken out before. Paul George ended up going back to Oklahoma. Although he never... Paul George never said, I'm never going to re-sign with a place. He said his intention was to try to go to L.A., but it was never locked in stone. I mean, AD's camp has been oddly clear in this, that there's basically 4 places that he would be willing to fire away for a longer stretch. The Lakers, because of LeBron. The Knicks, presumably because Madison Square Garden and or top pick and or he knows somebody else is going there already, and we can't really talk about it yet. The Bucks, because, I don't know, just smack to the face like that would actually work out. And then the Clippers were the last team on that list. And of those teams, the one that could actually make a good offer right now is the Lakers. We have to wait and see. We got some tweets yesterday. They were asking if we should go grab Josh Hart. Basically, once that trade was put out to the media, that was the Lakers' way of telling Pelicans ownership. I know this sounds crazy, but you have to sort of backtrack. Dell Demps is attempting to basically save his job. His contract, I believe, is up at the end of this season, so he's trying to get a new contract. The ownership of the Pelicans, part of them passed away. Remember the longtime owner, I believe his wife is running the team, but is a little bit less hands-on. So there, I believe, is sort of some work going on to try to convince ownership to bring Dell Demps back. And his job, basically, at this point, is to convince them that he's doing what nobody else can. Get the best possible package for a guy who claims he's going to be leaving town soon, and you don't want to make other teams too much better. You don't want to get ridiculed by the media for not getting enough. And so the Pelicans are leaking these stories that say, the Lakers are offering us these garbage trades, and that's why we haven't taken anything yet. We're doing what's best for the team. And so the Lakers then counter by leaking, we've got everything on the table. The offer that broke in yesterday, Brad Turner of the LA Times was talking about how the Lakers had basically offered every young player except Josh Hart and then some veterans to make the salaries match. They also offered to take Solomon Hill off the hands of the Pelicans, which I'm sure is something that ownership would like to see. Pels owners would love to not have to pay that dude the rest of his $25 million he's owed this year and next. So the leaking game continues. Ramona Shelburne saying that the Pels have been very quiet with the Lakers. This back and forth. Every single story that comes out, you have to try to figure out what the purpose is of that story. Clearly, the story that came out that talked about the Lakers making a bad offer came from the Pelicans to try to look like they were playing hardball. The story that came out that claimed the Lakers had offered all of the young pieces and salary relief, everything in the moon, obviously came from the Lakers to try to show Laker fan base and Pelicans ownership, hey, we're serious. It's your guy that's sitting on his hands. Then the story breaks saying that Boston is attempting to convince the Pels to hold off into the offseason for their trade offer. That one, I would think, leaked by Boston and the Pelicans. They both have something to gain on that front because it pushes the Lakers and it gives Demps an opportunity to hang on a little bit longer and convince ownership he's going to be doing what's best, and you bring me back and I'll get a great deal for this guy. And then finally, the Shelburne piece, which is basically that the Lakers have been attempting to make a trade and the Pels have been rebuking all of their offers, is definitely leaked by the Lakers to once again show Pelicans ownership, hey, your guy's not even engaging us. He's playing a game with the media, but he's not serious about this. And at the end of it, I don't have a bleeping clue which of those things is actually true. I'm inclined to believe the reality is somewhere in between all of this stuff, and everybody's playing their media game, and we still have Tuesday and Wednesday and Thursday morning before the trade deadline. I think he gets moved still. I think that a lot of this is posturing. I get the feeling that Boston has been reticent about moving all of their stuff. The Knicks, if they do manage to end up with the first overall pick, they might be just inclined to take Zion and keep him. Especially if that means some other dude like a Kyrie or a Kevin Durant is going to come to New York. Why send a guy that could be the next generation's transcendent talent and you get him on the cheapest contract imaginable? I mean, questions abound. Will the Pels get a better offer than the one the Lakers leaked to the media? I doubt it. Was it for real? I have no idea. So just try to sit back and enjoy it. Don't believe everything you read. Try to figure out who's trying to gain something by every story that flashes across your timeline, because they're all bunk. And as Josh Lloyd says, if you've read about it, it's probably dead. And I might even amend that to say, if you've read about it, it's probably made up for somebody's benefit. Like, the report from the Celtics. Oh, Celtics want the Pelicans to wait to the offseason. Of course they do. They can't make a trade right now. Duh. Of course they want the offseason. If they didn't, they'd be idiots. The Derek White injury, that's the other news from yesterday that got worse as the day went on. It was heel soreness at the start of the day, and by the end of the day, it was plantar fasciitis. He's missing the Spurs road trip. We don't know exactly how long he's going to be out, but that sucks. And we'll talk about that when we get to the Spurs recap of their game in Sacramento, which went about as you'd expect. Yes, it was a revenge game for San Antonio, but just nobody beats the Kings in Sacktown. They're really good at home. I said that on the podcast. Hated that revenge angle. Going to continue to track it, but hated it. Brutal bet. I hope nobody made that one. And I tried to make that very clear. We're tracking all of this stuff to look for angles, but that still doesn't mean every one of these things looks like a good bet on paper. This is Fantasy NBA Today, a hoopball presentation. I am Dan Besbris. This podcast and all shows at hoop-ball.com brought to you by Hawaiian Isles Kona Coffee. Wake yourself up, hoopball, with Hawaiian Isles Kona Coffee. HI Kona Coffee on Twitter, hawaiianisles.com on your web browser. I suggest you go there. It's a relaxing trip to a website. You got some nice pictures from Hawaii. They got some Valentine's Day stuff going on. Yes, you got some Valentine's Day single-serve cup gifts. They make stuff for your Keurig. I don't know if I've mentioned that on the pod before. They make the single servings as well. A lot of folks here at Hoopball, I know, on the staff side and on the longtime reader side, have been gobbling it up. Drinking it down might have been the better analogy. Anyway, that's, again, hawaiianisles.com. Search for Hawaiian Isles on Amazon. That's the easiest way to do it. Okay, yesterday, Denver was weird in this ball game. Nikola Jokic got himself into foul trouble and just never really found a rhythm and had probably his worst basketball game in like 2 months, which is saying something. He's been incredible. Trey Lyles was pretty good. Malik Beasley was okay. Monty Morris was okay. You had all these guys that were okay. And for it to happen in Detroit, sometimes these things, Motown gets the best of teams every once in a while. Detroit will steal a few games over the year by a team that, like, I feel they get lost in Greektown or something. No Paul Millsap, no Gary Harris, no Jamal Murray in this game. Denver, I know we say, what if they get healthy? I don't know that they ever will. Big game for Andre Drummond. Seemed to take this thing a little bit personally for whatever reason. Stanley Johnson went crazy off the bench, and then, the rest. Blake Griffin only logged 23 minutes in this ball game. It got it to blowout, and they got him a little bit of extra rest. Nothing really to take away from this one. Second game on the docket, plenty of stuff to take away. Atlanta wins in Washington, 137-129. John Collins had 15-11 in 16 minutes, but then had a face cut that drove him out of the ball game for the rest of the night, and it led to some pretty weird minute totals for this team when you add to the fact that Dwayne Dedmon was in foul trouble. So Dedmon fouled out. He only logged 20 minutes in this game, which left 28 minutes at center, and John Collins played only 16 minutes at power forward, so that left 30 minutes at power forward, and you got a pretty weird collection of minutes where DeAndre Besbris slid up to the 4 a little bit. Omari Spellman logged 30 minutes in this game. Somehow Alex Len only played 14 minutes in this ball game, and I would venture to say it's because the Wizards went super small. They played Jan Mahinmi and Thomas Bryant for a combined 19 minutes in this basketball game, which meant 29 center minutes went to, you got it, Jeff Green and Sam Decker. What? Yeah. Wizards got out-rebounded 51-39. That should surprise nobody when I just told you who played most of their center minutes in this ballgame yesterday. And that's stupid. That's short-sighted from Scott Brooks, who continues to make bad decisions on the NBA coaching sidelines and not, for whatever reason, take heat for it. Wizards seem to be running out of gas a little bit. They had this burst when John Wall went down, and now they're fading. And frankly, they need a big man. And we all thought that it was going to be Thomas Bryant, but he faded. Either he faded or they just wouldn't give him the opportunity. But the Wizards now sit in 10th place in the Eastern Conference, 3 games back of the Miami Heat, who have that coveted 8 seed at 24-27. You suck, Eastern Conference. Below the top 3 now. Ugh, man. Anyway, that's not the point of all this. Point of all this is, where do we find the value on these two teams? I mentioned with the trade deadline, you want to be really judicious with your moves. At the end of last week, I picked up Alex Len. I figured, don't use a move this week on him. I can afford to, if he dings me a little bit this week, it's not the worst thing in the world. I thought he would be better than this. I'll admit that. 2 points, 3 boards, and an assist is an atrocious basketball game. I thought, at least, generally when his 14 to 19 minutes, he's actually a decent per minute guy, but just this was a brutal matchup because Washington went insanely small and they took largely jumpers or put Len in a screen and roll, and so he was nowhere near the bucket to actually block shots or get rebounds, and that led to Omari Spellman and the power forwards doing all of the rebounding for Atlanta. Simple schematic thing, and so Atlanta just yanked him. It wasn't working. He couldn't guard the pick and roll with a bunch of tiny dudes on the floor. Not the point. Point of all this is, if Dwayne Dedmon gets moved, and we know he's on the block, and he's been awesome, and if he does get moved, his value is likely to take a massive hit post-deadline. I wish that I had a rosier outlook on Dedmon, but this is the best scenario for him. 20 to 30 minutes on a team that plays no defense and just gets up there, and they're stat crazy, Atlanta. They're actually a pretty fun team to have on fantasy, guys. His value will go in the tank. And then you've got Alex Len and Omari Spellman basically splitting the center minutes in what I've said before I think will be somewhat of a timeshare, but I also get the feeling that Len would probably be the starter. Teams like to go to a more traditional 5 at the beginning of a ball game, and as a starter, we found this out with Ivica Zubac, and just that's a recent example of something that you've seen for decades. The guy who starts the game has an easier path to getting the 24-plus minutes in a timeshare than the guy off the bench. That's not to say that the starter will always play more minutes than the other guy, but I would venture to say that even if it's 55% of the time to 45%, the starter usually plays more minutes than the reserve. Usually. So that's why I picked up Len. I figured I'd squat on him for a couple of days, and then he put up this clunker, and I thought, you know what, I'm going to go do something else weird. And so I'm still squatting on him in one spot, and then in another league where I thought I would, I decided to go stream that joint because there's no moves limit in that particular league. So I could dump him and go get him again later because ain't nobody picking him up after a 2.3 rebound effort. He'll still be on the wire in a couple of days. Omari Spellman, you might see him get picked up a couple of times from this one. It's possible that he ends up posting some decent value post-trade deadline as well. I just think Len has the clearer path to minutes. And we've seen Spellman has, and I'll do this as tactfully as I can, a bit of a weight issue. He's said it before. He's confirmed it as much as anybody. He's averaging 17 minutes a game this series, and he's at 0.6 steals and 0.6 blocks in those 17 minutes a game. If you're comparing that to Alex Len, he's averaging 19 minutes a game, and he's at 0.4 steals and 1 block. So Spellman, perhaps his upside lies more in scoring, 3-pointers. He can spread the floor a little bit more than Len. Alex more in the blocking, rebounding department. Neither one of these guys is going to break the bank, but I do think if Dedmon gets moved, you're going to see at least one of them creep up into that top 100 range, and my money, at least at this juncture, is on Alex Len. Kevin Huerter played well, 19-5-4. And he's been playing well. He was a guy that I was a little bit afraid of at first, but now that they're starting to just kind of take the leash off a bit, he's been posting better lines of late. They're just cutting him loose, and it's been to the detriment of Taurean Prince, who actually did get hot in this ball game. He had 21 points, but he didn't do anything else. He continues to be a guy that just isn't heavily involved in ball handling, and it makes his life difficult. He had 2 assists in this game. He had 5 3-pointers, but only 2 rebounds and 1 steal. He only got 10 shots up in this game. He only played 26 minutes in this game. I don't like any of that stuff. Kent Bazemore, 16 insanely productive minutes. We know what he can do with 24 to 27 minutes a ball game, and he might end up with that in Atlanta after the trade deadline, but they're keeping him quiet right now as they showcase some of these other guys and let the veteran get his minutes in to keep the wheels warm in case they move him. If you see Baze get moved to a place like, Houston, he slots in immediately as an interesting fantasy asset. And we saw Houston play today, and, James Ennis played 34 minutes Gerald Green, 24 minutes. Austin Rivers, 28 minutes. You could easily carve out 26 for Kent Bazemore from that stuff. And I know Eric Gordon will come back and he'll take another chunk away. But if you don't think Baze would jump in front of a guy like James Ennis, well, he would. And he could have a lot of fun spreading the floor in Houston. So there's places for him to go where things get open. I'm curious about the buyout side of all of this stuff because that doesn't necessarily have to happen at the trade deadline. And if they're going to just play Bazemore 16 minutes a game for the next month while we wait for the buyout, that's a pretty tough guy to sit on at that point. So hold him for now. We may end up in a spot where you have to cut him just because they're going to shave his minutes and you basically can't afford to just sit on a guy for another month after the whole injury stuff. But look, I mean, he put up a good fantasy line in 16 minutes in this ballgame. That's all he needed. So you're certainly not cutting him after this one. And you got to let this thing play out to the deadline. Washington side, Jordan McRae had 20 points in 26 minutes. I don't expect that'll happen again all too soon. Although I should say, take a grain of salt. A lot of times guys get hot for a couple of games. It's not going to last forever, is what I will say. Markieff Morris is targeting returns sometime around the All-Star break. That's about 2.5 weeks from now. So you're not making any moves on that front. Satoransky only played 29 minutes for some reason in this ballgame. Inexplicably, they went to a Sato-less ending. He had 11, 7, and 9. Sato was on his way to a potential triple-double, and they just decided, no, we're gonna do something else. And it's weird because he's a point guard who's super tall, so it's not like they would lose something by playing a smaller guy. They just went to basically an all-wings lineup with Porter, Beal, Green, McRae, and Ariza, and you lost to Atlanta. So maybe Scotty Brooks, you roll the kid out there that's actually playing well for you. Either way, we complain, but 29 minutes is not that bad, and he almost triple-doubled, so cool. Jeff Green is still going to play big minutes until Keefe comes back. I think at that point you likely see a fade. Milwaukee blew out Brooklyn. Chris Middleton stinks, man. I don't know what's wrong with this dude this year. I thought the hot streak was going to last way longer than it did. Giannis and Eric Bledsoe steamrolling people these days. Brooklyn ran into a tough defense. Jared Allen got his 11 rebounds and 4 blocks, so that'll do just fine. And everybody else in the team was held in check, and we rumble along. Indiana, a game winner from Darren Collison, took care of the New Orleans Pelicans by a bucket. Collison is locked into a fantastic end of season. Domantas Sabonis bounced back, just as we said on yesterday's podcast. Thad Young, no steals, but everything else has been fine for him for the past 2.5 months. And then Miles Turner got his 5 defensive stats, despite shooting the ball very poorly in this basketball game. The note, however, on Indiana, I keep thinking Tyreke Evans is going to have to be the guy to give him a little push, but not yet. I did like that he took 12 shots in his 19 minutes, so he certainly wasn't bashful out there, and he had the highest usage rate of anybody on the team. But the simple fact is right now, Corey Joseph logged 31 minutes in this game, and Tyreke logged 19. As long as that stays the way it is, you can't really use him. I believe in you, Tyreke. One of these days. Not this one, apparently. Pelicans side, they continue to rest everybody. Obviously, with the AD rumors swirling, it's sort of coded the fact that they're also shopping Elfrid Payton, Etuan Moore, Niko Mirotic, maybe even Julius Randle, although I believe he has a player option for the second year. I probably should have looked that up before the podcast, but he would seem to be a tougher one to move. And so Jahlil Okafor, he's got plenty of wiggle room right now while everybody on the team is out. Cheick Diallo's playing well. Kenrich Williams is playing well. I mean, these are names you never thought you'd hear at the beginning of the season. Darius Miller. Tim Frazier finally had a bad one. Here's the thing, and here's why I know you guys keep yelling at me about Jahlil Okafor, and I have no problem with you trotting him out there until the trade deadline, but be warned that whoever gets moved on this Pelicans team, by all accounts, there's going to be somebody coming back. And if they're young and worth developing, then they're going to play. And so it's going to cut into minutes a little bit. I don't know that guys like Miller and Williams and Okafor can play 35 minutes a game the rest of the way if any one of a few things happens. Number one, if AD doesn't get moved, do they shut him down for the year or do they play him in short bursts? If Mirotic doesn't get moved, does he play the rest of the year? Does Julius Randle play the rest of the year? I mean, they have 3 high-usage big men that are just sitting right now. If any one of those guys comes back, it cuts into something. Might not cut into all of it, but it cuts into something. And what if they move a guy like Anthony Davis? What if they move Nico Mirotic? Do they move him to, we heard Utah was interested in Nico last year. Does Derek Favors come back? If he does, he becomes an instant fantasy asset on that Pelicans team. He'd go crazy. And that would crush poor Okafor. That's like the one guy coming back that would really ruin him. A lot of the other guys they could get back, I think you could still see Jaleel playing 20-something, whatever. I don't know about 33 to 36 the rest of the year, but again, you grabbed him, you streamed him, which was a really smart move at this point because then the AD trade news broke. Remember, this was a first pickup because AD sprained a finger, and we thought he was going to be out for a week. And you were like, oh, cool, I'll play Okafor for 3 games. Well, then the news broke, and it became, all right, well, I'll play him until the trade deadline. And now at this point, you just sort of ride it through for a couple of reasons. Number one, he might actually be okay after the trade deadline. I don't think he's going to be a 25 and 13 guy every night, but he could still be okay. And number two, you're saving moves this week anyway, so it's not like you were going to do something in that spot regardless. But pay attention. Kenrick Williams, I don't think he's playing 34 minutes the rest of the way. Somebody else is going to suit up for this team. I just don't know who it is. And it might be the guys that are already there. Houston, fairly predictable game. Chris Paul made his return. He had 6 turnovers in this game after the rest game, but he did have 5 steals, so the turnovers almost evened out on that front. Houston as a team had 13 swipes in this game. Might want to try to take care of the basketball there, Phoenix. James Harden is just crazy lately. I like Chris Paul's line. I like Kenneth Faried's line, although he did miss a couple of free throws. Tough to complain about the usual suspects on that side. Phoenix, there are some complaints we could log. Number one, DeAndre Ayton played well, so he saw some extra minutes in this ballgame, and that hurt our guy Rashawn Holmes, who still managed 11 points and a couple of rebounds in his 14 minutes, but no defensive stats, and that's the stuff that floats it for us. So that's a down game for him. I'm willing to admit that, but I'm very much still in the pro Rashawn camp. Mikal Bridges shot just 3 for 9 with 3 turnovers in this game. That's a little bit of a downer, but he did have 7, 4, and 5 with 3 steals and a 3-pointer. And the culprit, really, for all of this is Josh Jackson taking 23 shots. There's no universe where he should take 23 shots. Devin Booker apparently is playing with a tight hamstring, so he could just bail out at a moment's notice. TJ Warren is out until heaven knows when. It's still Bridges and Holmes as the fringe guys for me on this team. It's been nice to see Kelly Oubre playing well, but he's likely owned in, I would assume, basically every league with as hot as he got when everybody was hurt for Phoenix, and he's been able to hold it together since they came back. He's turned out to be a really nice grab. It turned out, it's funny, we were having this Oubre versus Bridges battle for a while, and all we really needed was for TJ Warren to go down, and it became Oubre and Bridges. Fun. Both those guys posting big-time cash stats. Like that stuff. And then San Antonio blown out in Sacramento as predicted. You just don't fade the Kings at home. They're too good out there, and certainly for the Spurs, the Derek White injury is a kick to the gut. He was the guy that had really solidified San Antonio's turnaround. They'd been so much better since he got healthy, and I think you're going to see them dip again. I mean, they were not much better than a 500 team when he wasn't in the lineup. This is probably an opportunity to fade the Spurs, particularly on the road. Aldridge, DeRozan, these guys are going to be okay. Rudy Gay is going to be fine as well. If you're looking for a potential step in here while White is out, it would appear to be Davis Bertans. They're starting to trust him a little bit. 2 days ago, I said Davis Bertans was getting ready to disappear because DeMar came back, but then Derek White went out. So I spoke too soon on that front. I thought the Spurs were about to be healthy. As it turns out, it was just one guy up, one guy down, and as long as there's that one little window to wiggle through, Bertans is the guy that's been wiggling through it. However, on a week where all of your moves are of critical importance, you're probably not scooping Davis Bertans for the chance he hits 3 3-pointers and blocks a shot. You're probably waiting until the trade deadline and hunt a guy with better upside. Marvin Bagley stuffed one in my face by making 3 out of his 4 free throws during what was otherwise a really impressive game, 24 and 12. I've talked about how he's needed to show growth on the defensive stats and the free throw percent number, and he did that for this one. He's been pretty good lately. This is 3 consecutive double-doubles for him. I never said he had a problem in scoring and rebounding. What I said he had a problem in was defensive stats and free throws, and he hasn't fully corrected that, but he certainly did for one shining evening. Tuesday on the docket, you got a nice little late-game slate, Boston and Cleveland. Not a whole lot to watch in this one. Kyrie Irving was ruled out a day in advance, so it's going to be Terry Rozier picking on the Cavaliers. For the Cavs, who cares? Ante Zizic had a little bit of a run, but Larry Nance is back. There's actually a chance that Kevin Love touches the floor in this basketball game. He hasn't officially been ruled out yet, but I'm guessing we probably don't see him until later in the week. So keep an eye on the center minutes, is what I would say. With Chetty Osman, I believe he's likely out for this ball game, although we'll wait on a final ruling on that one as well. Do we see a 2-center lineup where they play Larry Nance at the 4, Zizic at the 5, and then maybe both of those guys could end up being interesting? Clippers in Charlotte, Danilo Gallinari might play in this ball game, so I'm very curious to see what that does to Patrick Beverley. Lakers at Indiana. LeBron will play in this game, and as a result, the Lakers are a 3-point road favorite in Indiana. That's a big number. Although Pacers are on a back-to-back, they lost in LA. I think there could be a little bit of revenge on the brain for Indiana. But you know damn well LeBron doesn't want to see this team lose anymore. They're currently the 10 seed in the Western Conference, but only a game and a half back of the Clippers. So very much in their sights, but the Lakers got to start putting some wins together now with their big guy back in the lineup. With LeBron back, we don't know the status of Zubats. I think he's expected to play. After that little locker room kerfuffle, do we see more of the veterans like Beasley and McGee for a game or two? This stuff does tend to actually help the guys who cause a fuss. The squeaky wheel gets the grease as it goes. And for the Lakers, a couple of those squeaky wheels probably squeaking for a reason, and then the Beasley wheel just squeaking because somebody didn't install it right. Knickerbockers. DeAndre Jordan is playing minutes. Mitchell Robinson is expected back. Very curious to see if Luke Cornett touches the floor in this game. Is he the second center or is he a third center? What's the deal with DeAndre Jordan? Do they hold him until the buyout deadline? Heaven forbid. Minnesota at Memphis. No Derrick Rose, which means you got more Jared Bayless time. Sounds like Jeff Teague and Tyus Jones are each getting closer, but we don't have a note to see if they're playing. For Memphis, the guys on the trade block have been playing lately. I don't know if that's going to continue in this ball game. We've been seeing a lot more of Justin Holiday lately. I've talked about how I really like him post-deadline. Nothing's changed for me on that front. Orlando at Oklahoma City. Jonathan Isaac is just cruising all of a sudden. Toronto, Philadelphia should be a fun one, but no real fantasy notes. And then Miami and Portland. Miami, we're always watching. Kelly Olynyk's been good for a couple of games in a row, but he's obviously teased us like this 15 times in the last year and a half. So here we go again. Hassan Whiteside, I said it over Twitter, and I said it on yesterday's show. I think I'm benching him in the leagues where I have him. He is absolutely positively killing the free throw category. He's the worst in the NBA. From an impact perspective, you can't buttress that. The fact that I think my team is still in only like 4th place in free throws in a Roto League is a testament to the rest of the club, because Hassan Whiteside is just ruining life. Ruining mine. Ruining my Roto team's free throw life. Does that mean you can slot anybody else in? No, because he's still logging the bulk of the minutes, and he's getting you rebounds and some blocks, not as many lately. But those free throws, man, they are soul-crushing. We ran the numbers on yesterday's podcast. If you had just played Nerlens Noel all year, you'd probably be up 2 or 3 points in your Roto League right now. That's a big deal from one player. One guy. Swap him out for a waiver wire, dude. From a betting standpoint on this Tuesday evening card, and I still think I can actually get this show done under the limit I set for myself, you have actually 2 second halves of home and home games playing out that occurred over the span of about a week. The Thunder beat the Magic on the road by 9 a week ago on the 29th of January. Now the Magic are on the road, and they're catching a whole bunch of points in Oklahoma City. And also the Grizzlies and the Wolves played 6 days ago. Minnesota beat Memphis 99-97 in Minnesota. And now this is a pick'em, but you also have different allotment of guys that are not playing in the ballgame. So it's tough to say, how far the line should have moved and how far it actually did because of guys that are or are not on the floor. That's one that I would consider avoiding, although if you're going to take either side, it's probably the Memphis side. Going back home, Marc Gasol, Mike Conley, is this their last game as a member of the Memphis Grizzlies? There may be some emotion involved in this thing. So you're looking at the Magic and you're looking at the Grizzlies in those two basketball games. You've also got a handful of revenge games that aren't those. I think there's 6 total, and Orlando is one of them. Portland is on revenge. They lost in Miami, I believe. I feel like I might have written that one down wrong. Cleveland is 0-2 against Boston. Charlotte lost to the Clippers earlier this year. And the Knicks lost to Detroit, but I don't think you can really talk about that one as a revenge game because half the Knicks are gone that lost that first one. That one I might even consider wiping off the list. I'd love to bring it back up here on today's show. We're going to have that DFS contest tomorrow, but the link is not available just yet at the time of recording. I'm guessing we'll get it by about noontime today, Tuesday, for our Wednesday DFS contest, so stay tuned for that. If you'd like to get on our mailing list, please let me know. You can send an email to support@hoop-ball.com. You can tweet at me. Let me know. We'll get you on the DFS mailing list. And then I also mentioned on yesterday's show that the premium product for Hoop Ball is on sale for $7.99 for the next week. And you can use a coupon code to get that down to $4.99. That's $5 for 2.5 months of premium product. You get all of our premium live shows where you can interact with Hoop Ball pros, ask them questions on YouTube. They'll break down your individual team, whatever questions you've got in the moment. We've got those every night, except Friday evening because we do have the live show during the day. That's the free one, of course. You've got the premium show. There's the Sunday waiver wire show, the Monday weekly lineup show. For those of you in weekly leagues, you got Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday evening premium shows where you can interact with the pros. All of these are interactive programs. You've also got the daily DFS stuff. You've got all the tools, the start-sit tool, the streaming tool, the schedule grid, the dynasty tools, the projections tools. All of this stuff available to you for $5 for the rest of the year with coupon code Neil is the one I know still works. So do check that out. Hoop-ball.com. Click on the premium tab. Choose Go Premium and go get yourself a demo. I told you guys I was going to keep this thing in the 30 to 40 minute range, and I do believe I did it, even though I'm talking slowly here at the end. Stay tuned, man. There could be Anthony Davis news breaking before this podcast is released. From the second I finish recording to the second it gets released, there could be something happening. I think it's about 50-50, which is the lamest take I could possibly... You know what? Screw it. I'll go, he is traded. I'm going to take the is traded side. And I think he's going... I think he's going to go to the Raptors in a surprise late twist because we haven't heard anything out of the Masai Ujiri camp. Surprise Raptors. Siakam, Anunoby, and some picks swooping in just to irritate the Lakers, even though they weren't on the re-sign list. But you know what that could do? They bring in Anthony Davis. They go win a championship. Kawhi re-signs. They trade Anthony Davis the next year. They got Kawhi locked up. It's his team. They can build a whole team around him by trading AD. I mean, go do it, Toronto. Make it so. And then trade him to the Lakers the following year. Build your whole team anew with a bunch of Lakers young guys. I'm fine with that. Plus, Lakers, Toronto, I've got a soft spot for them. I always pick them in my playoff brackets, and they always got beat by LeBron. So now maybe they can just go get AD, win it when LeBron has nobody to play with out in the Western Conference, and then send AD to LeBron's team the following year. Because, Laker fan and all, and secret Raptors fan over here. Nothing would make the Celtics more upset. Sorry, Celtics fans. I had to do it. Okay, that's it. This is Fantasy NBA Today, a Hoop Ball presentation brought to you as always by Hawaiian Isles Kona Coffee Company. Tomorrow, Micah Patria on the podcast. We'll talk DFS, get you ready for the contest. 125 people. Prizes for the top 20, including a goodie bag from Hawaiian Isles for the number 2 team in the contest and a Hoop Ball t-shirt for the person that comes in number 1, in addition to the top 20 getting the cash goodies. Thursday, solo, and then Friday with Brewski. We'll tackle all the questions of the week and get you situated. But of course, the biggest news that I almost forgot to mention on today's podcast because I wanted to rush through the other stuff. Thursday, 9 a.m. to 1 p.m. Pacific time, trade deadline live show on YouTube. We'll be tweeting the links constantly. Set your reminders. Join us. All the Hoopball pros and some guest pros coming in as well to join us on the live trade deadline show. We will have the longest trade deadline live show of anybody in fantasy sports. No one else does 4 hours without commercial, just us here at the Hoob. Hope you can join us for that one as well. Tell you more about it tomorrow. We'll keep reminding you, and obviously tweets will be going out constantly in the next day or so. I cannot wait. It's going to be a wing-ding. I'm Dan Besbris at Dan Besbris on Twitter. Hit me up if you have a question. Rate and review the podcast if you have a moment as well. And have a lovely Tuesday. So long.
This has been a Hoop Ball presentation.